What's involved with backpacking in the winter? What's up, backpackers? I'm Dan, and welcome to Backpacking Adventures, where we talk about backpacking, hiking, and gear. If you're new to this channel and those interest you, consider subscribing, but make sure you hit the bell notification so you don't miss a thing. Today I'm going to talk about winter backpacking and what you need to do to stay warm. When I say winter, I'm referring to temperatures around 0 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Some people are intimidated by winter camping, but it can be a great experience. And when I started backpacking, I assumed that most people did not backpack in the winter. However, last year I did backpack in the winter, and there was not one time on any of my trips that I did not pass another backpacker. There are some pros to backpacking in the winter. There are no bugs. Most of the critters are gone. If you're backpacking on the same trail you did in warmer months, it will look totally different. It's like hiking on a different trail. Without the foliage, your views are more extensive. You can even see farther into the woods. Now, there are some downsides. To me, the biggest downside is it just gets dark so darn early. This means you can't hike as long, and your trips are usually shorter unless you like hiking and setting up in the dark. And the second is that it's cold. You're constantly adjusting what you're wearing to control your temperature. And you have to do this because you don't want to be so warm that you sweat, but then you don't want to be so cold that you risk hypothermia. So it is a constant battle. But overall, the main thing is you just want to stay warm. Warm while you're hiking, warm while you're at camp, and warm while you're sleeping, each of which require different things. However, the main thing in winter is your clothes. You want at least a base layer, a mid layer, a puffy coat, and a hard shell coat. Since while hiking, it is easier to stay warm. You want to make sure you layer your clothes so that way you can take off layers when you get too warm and you can add on layers if you get too cold. But when you're hiking in the winter, it can seem to be a pain because you usually have to stop several times either to add on clothes or to take clothes off. But the main point is you want to try to control your body temperature as best you can. You don't want to sweat because when you stop hiking, you're going to get cold. And there's usually a fine line between you being too warm and too cold. As me and my friend always say, we're just always on the verge of being cold. Now, if there's snow on the ground and you need to set up your tent, you're going to want to stamp out a tent platform so you don't sink in at night. If the conditions are dry and light, you want to let that tent pad sit for 30 minutes so it refreezes before you set up your tent. Now, if it's windy or breezy, it is very important that you adequately stake down your tent or your tarp. Now, if there's a lot of snow or the ground is frozen, you may not be able to put your stakes in the ground. In this case, you dig out a pit in the snow and you place your stakes in sideways. Then you bury them with snow and you pack them down tight. You also let this sit for 30 minutes or so to let that freeze. If your stakes are pulling through the snow, you can tie your guy lines to a larger branch or stick and then bury that in the snow. This will keep them in place. If there's no creek or stream or water source, just pick an area in the campsite that you're going to designate to use the snow for your water. And since it gets dark early, you may be sitting around a lot. Now at camp, you'll be sitting around and you won't be moving as much, so you won't be generating that heat. And one thing that tends to happen is the cold just seeps through the bottom of your boots. So you want to make sure you have insulated shoes. You can also combat this by standing on your sit pad or a closed foam pad. Or you can do a hack that I use, which is I take out my insoles, I trace them on a piece of Reflectix, and I put the Reflectix under my insole in my shoe. This keeps the heat reflecting back to my feet. And again, for standing around camp, you want to make sure you have the adequate layers of clothes to help keep you warm. Now, for staying warm while sleeping, you want to make sure you have separate sleep clothes that you can use when you're sleeping. This is because while hiking, you could be sweating, you could get stuck in a rainstorm, or it could be snowing where your clothes are just wet. So it is very important that you have a dry set of clothes to wear for sleeping. This includes a complete dry base layer and extra socks and potentially gloves. You also want to make sure that your shelter is set up in a way that it blocks most of the wind. You want to make sure you have a good sleeping bag or quilt and a sleeping pad that are appropriate for the temperatures you're going to be in. Also, if you're hiking and you're camping in temperatures that are below freezing, you're going to have to take precautions with your water filter, your water bottles, and your electronics. If you use Nalgene bottles or those metal bottles, you can put boiling water in and keep the water in your tent or your hammock. This will also help to keep you warm, but be careful that it does not leak. A good practice is to put that then in a Ziploc bag. Now your water filter, if it freezes, it will render it useless and you won't even know it. So you want to make sure that you sleep with your water filter closer to the body, the better. I always carry an extra Ziploc bag so I can put it in that bag and keep it in my pocket or lay it on my chest in my hammock. Now, if I know that water is accessible to me, I will at the end of the night completely dump out my water. I will open them up and keep the caps open so that way they don't freeze. Then in the morning, I'll just refill my water. Also, if you have any electronics, you want to keep them or the batteries in your pockets at night. This will keep them from draining. Now, I know a lot of YouTubers talk about base weight and being ultralight, below 10 pounds, and not bringing a lot of gear. That's fine, but to me, winter is a little bit different. There's a little bit more risk to it, so you want to make sure that you have the adequate clothes and the adequate gear to keep you comfortable. In the very cold weather, it is more important to have gear that you don't use than it is to need gear that you don't have. Do you backpack in the winter? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, consider subscribing and give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching, see you next time, and go explore.